Hey everyone. Um, so today I just want to give my thoughts on intelligence and what that actually means. So I think in our Western culture today there's an extremely high emphasis on the intellect. So this is primarily residing within the left side of the brain, so the capacity for language and to process things sequentially revolves around logic, mathematics, cuts the world up into many pieces, um, sees things in like a very linear A to B to C to D fashion, doesn't consider that there's other avenues of branching out in terms of thinking. Yeah, there's a very high emphasis on that, and that's considered what constitutes intelligence. And I think it's been that way because of what the society idealizes as gods. It idolizes money, which is driven by a market, but it also idolizes material because since the society has, in a sense, not all of the internal spiritual qualities of its foundations out of the water, it gets people into a situation of enslaving themselves, whereby they're chasing the consumption of their own world, they're chasing material at the expense of others because gratification of the five senses and the lower base nature of the anthropoid ape is all that matters. There's no discussion of the higher nature of reality or meaning of life or the purpose of why we're here and what we're doing. Um, so the intellect gets put on the pedestal because the intellect has the capacity to divide the world up, to slice it down to its fundamental components, and ultimately rears or takes the steering wheel of controlling space and time. And through the controlling of space and time comes the control of material, comes the production of material. If materiality is the god, then intellect must be God's child, and therefore its praise comes as an outcrop of what the society desires. Not to say that the intellect is bad, but we get put in a situation where unhinged intellect without the empathetic, holistic, moral, unifying aspect of our consciousness, the right side of our brain, the creative side, the compassionate side, that takes into account the systems of people and morality. When that's left out of the equation, which it has done for, I'd say, like the past 100-200 years, we get into a situation where we can create solar panels and wind farms, but at the same time we can also create nuclear bombs. And you have very intellectual people who are told that they're intelligent, and yet they're given their their idea of what's moral by a bunch of psychopaths in government, since they get rolled into the various institutions. I mean, the greatest example of that in contemporary times would be China and its surveillance system, the citizen point system, whereby there's literally no way you can walk in China without having your face recognized, without having artificial intelligence tracking the way you walk, tracking which shops you go to, creating custom advertisements for you in order to do that. But the more sinister aspect is any dissent against their communistic regime, which is immoral because you're basically stealing people's means to production and handing it off to some external force that just gets to control that, which is totally immoral and it's an abomination. But you have that kind of system weighing down on the technocrats on and the engineers and the scientists who they've got their esteem set in place because they were told by an external force, which is one of the key traits of these organic portal personalities, to just externalize their sense of self to the group, to the collective. um, yeah, then they get roped into creating their own imprisonment. I mean, I watched a documentary about the surveillance grid over there, and they interviewed this programmer, and the interviewer was saying, well, do you not have any concerns for privacy or for surveillance? And his answer was, well, no, because it keeps people safe. But then he never went further than that. But then you'd want to ask him, yeah, but how do you know that? Who told you that? You know, what are the interests of the people who told you that? Have a think about it. But they don't. They never do that, of course, because they never think outside of their conditioning, the external culture, a culture that's been created for them. People like us, we create culture because our sense of morals come from within. We're individuals with individual thoughts, which are united by principles. Now, creativity, art, music, that kind of stuff, that's put on the back burner, although it's quite necessary. Um, it's not given as much emphasis as the sciences and mathematics. They should have equal aspects, or they should have equal weightings in the manufacturing of our consensus reality. You need to have someone to keep technology in place. So, and I do. If any of you guys follow Mark Passio's work, I would highly recommend checking out his content. I'll actually leave a link in the description below of a video where he talks about the various kinds of brain imbalances that gets created within our society, which creates a kind of master-slave dynamic, which plays out across all corresponding levels of the social hierarchy. And the basic idea behind that, which is rooted in neuroscience, in broad general terms, is that someone who's overly intellectual sees the world as sees everything as random, a random set of events. It 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 Yeah, basically creates atheistic people who see everything as a cosmic accident. Everything is random. There's no sense of self beyond this material world. Everything's confined to space and time. There's moral relativism in that there's no overarching force that creates the universe. Then everything's dog eat dog, and man creates morals because man's the highest level of intelligence in this place, which is just totally wrong because every effect has a cause. So this place is most definitely an effect. This place definitely had a cause. So just through that logic, which is somewhat illogical to the to the left brain imbalanced people. But yeah, it creates a kind of master mentality whereby you want to basically control everything. And then on the flip side of that, you have the guys who are right brain imbalanced, who basically think that everything is predetermined. Everything's an act of God's. There's nothing that they can do to change their current circumstances. They just have to pray and beg for salvation from some external deity. Everything. It's a slave mentality where they're just waiting for some kind of savior to come and pick them up. It creates religion. I mean, you could argue also that atheism is a kind of scientism-based religion, whereby they call themselves skeptics, but what they actually are is rigidly skeptical, where they use their theory of evolution and the Big Bang as just miracles, or as Terence McKenna said, I think he said something along the lines of, give me one miracle, and then the entire story can unravel from there. Well, like those are two huge miracles that they simply just take as absolute fact and absolute truth, which is kind of a religion in and of themselves. And they actually they're actually not really scientific, because if they looked within themselves, then they would find a world of um, information that sits outside of the physical domain. Yet they're so skeptical with their science and their belief purely that if something can't be measured with material probes, then it mustn't exist. It's just so unscientific. Like, I'm not saying that pure science is great, but most of these intellectuals are actually worshippers at the altar of scientism. So yeah, you basically get the guys who are overly intellectual, left brain imbalance, controlling the people who are right brain imbalance, who are basically just thinking that their circumstances can't be helped. And yeah, like this just plays out throughout the whole society. So it's ultimately based on slavery in some way, shape or form. The only way to break out of that is to have holistic intelligence, whereby you have both mental faculties and you have compassion and morality, and that's the only way out of it, really. You break yourself out of being a master or a slave. You don't control anyone. You abide by principles, by your morals. You also have the capacity of having control over space and time. This is why I've always had an interest both in science and the arts, because holistic intelligence doesn't leave out either side. Just imagine a world whereby you're only concentrating on one aspect of human consciousness. That's so limiting, man. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on intelligence. Just yeah, don't get too wrapped up in the left or the right side of the brain, please.